I never imagined my life could change so drastically in such a short time. A few years ago, I considered myself a successful and happy woman. My name is Sarah, and I had built a successful career in advertising. At 35, I was the creative director at one of the largest agencies in New York City, with an enviable salary and recognition in the industry. But it wasn't just in my work that I felt fulfilled. For 10 years, I had been married to James, a brilliant and charismatic university professor. We met during college and it was love at first sight. He was a few years older, but we shared the same dreams and ambitions. We got married as soon as I graduated, and since then, we had built a life that seemed straight out of a modern fairy tale. We lived in a beautiful apartment in the heart of New York City, with a view of Central Park. On Sunday mornings, we would have coffee on the balcony, planning our next trips or discussing the books we were reading. James had always been a natural intellectual, and our conversations were stimulating and profound. I felt constantly challenged and inspired by him. Our social life was busy. Dinners with friends, art openings, lectures. We were the couple everyone admired, the one that seemed to have found the perfect balance between love, career, and fun. I remember a friend once telling me, "Sarah, you have it all. How do you manage?" I would smile and thank her, never imagining that I was about to discover how fragile happiness we think is unshakable can be. Everything began to change when Emily moved into the apartment next to ours. She was a stunning woman in her early 30s, with long black hair and a captivating smile. Emily was a freelance photographer who had just returned from a long stay in Europe. Her apartment was soon filled with fascinating photos from her travels, and she always had an interesting story to tell. At first, I was enchanted by our new neighbor. Emily seemed to bring a fresh and vibrant energy to the building. We invited her to dinner at our apartment a few weeks after her arrival, and the evening was pleasant. James, usually reserved with strangers, seemed especially animated, asking questions about Emily's travels and sharing his own experiences abroad. Looking back, I realize I should have noticed the signs that first night. The way James leaned slightly towards Emily when she spoke, the sparkle in his eyes when she laughed at his jokes. But I was blinded by confidence in our relationship, by the certainty that we had something unbreakable. The following weeks brought subtle changes. James, who always preferred to spend evenings at home reading or grading his students' papers, began going out more frequently. He mentioned casual encounters with Emily in the elevator, conversations about photography and art in the hallway. "She invited me to see some exhibitions," he said one day, casually. "You don't mind, do you? I know you've been busy with that big campaign." I hesitated for a moment, a pang of discomfort running through me. But I quickly brushed off the feeling. "Of course I don't mind," I replied, forcing a smile. "It'll be good for you to get out a bit, see new things." James started spending more time away from home. Sometimes, I would hear him coming home late at night, with careful steps down the hallway. When I asked about his outings the next day, he would speak vaguely about interesting exhibitions or new cafes he had discovered. I told myself I was being paranoid. James and I were a solid couple, with a decade of history. He was an upright, honest man. There was no reason for suspicion. Still, a seed of doubt had been planted, and I felt it grow day by day. It was on a Friday night that my world collapsed. I had canceled a dinner with clients, feeling exhausted after a particularly stressful week at work. All I wanted was a quiet night at home with James. I imagined we could order food, open a bottle of wine, and watch a movie together, like we used to do in the early years of our marriage. When I got home, the apartment was empty. I called James, but he didn't answer. I sent a message asking where he was, but got no response. Restless, I went out to the balcony, hoping the cool night air might calm my growing anxiety. That's when I saw it. In the building across from ours, through a lit window, I could clearly see the interior of Emily's apartment. And there was James, sitting on the couch next to her, laughing and gesturing animatedly. Between them, an open bottle of wine. My heart seemed to stop. I watched, paralyzed, as they talked, their bodies leaning towards each other with an intimacy that made me feel nauseous. At one point, James placed his hand on Emily's knee, and she made no move to push it away. I don't know how long I stood there, watching that scene that was destroying everything I believed about my marriage. When I finally managed to move, I staggered back into the apartment, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, disbelief. Everything mixed into a sharp pain that seemed to suffocate me. I spent the night wide awake, alternating between crying fits and moments of intense anger. When James arrived, around 2 in the morning, I pretended to be asleep. I didn't have the strength to confront him, not yet. I needed to process what I had seen, to understand what it meant for us. The days that followed were a nightmare. I dragged myself through work, unable to concentrate, always on the verge of tears. At home, I could barely look at James. He must have realized something was wrong, but he didn't ask. Perhaps he was relieved that I wasn't asking questions. A week after that fateful night, I received a call that would change the course of my life. It was Olivia, an old college friend who was now the CEO of a rising advertising agency in Los Angeles. She had an ambitious project on her hands and wanted me to lead the creative team. "It's a unique opportunity, Sarah," she said, enthusiastically. "I know you're established there, but think about it. It would be a new challenge, a chance to really make your mark in the industry." As I listened to Olivia talk about the project, about the potential for growth, about how she trusted me to make it happen, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days: hope. A small flame lit up in my chest, the possibility of a new beginning. "Can I think about it for a bit?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Of course," Olivia replied. "But don't take too long. We need to start soon." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long time, weighing my options. The idea of leaving everything behind, my stable job, my apartment, my life in New York, was scary. But staying meant facing the reality of my broken marriage, living with the constant reminder of James's betrayal. That night, when James came home, I was waiting for him in the living room. He stopped when he saw me, immediately realizing that something was different. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. James slowly sat down in the armchair across from me, his face a mixture of apprehension and guilt. "I know about you and Emily," I began, the words coming out like a dammed river that finally finds a breach. "I saw you together in her apartment last week." James's face paled. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing him. "I don't want to hear excuses or explanations," I continued. "What I want to know is, does this mean something to you? Is it just an adventure or is there more?" James was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. I didn't plan this, Sarah," he said softly. "It happened gradually. Emily and I, we connected in a way I didn't expect. I know this sounds terrible, but I think I fell in love with her." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I knew, of course. I had seen the signs, felt the change. But hearing him admit it, hearing that he really had feelings for her, it was more painful than I could have imagined. "I received a job offer in Los Angeles," I said, after a moment of tense silence. "I think I'm going to accept it." James looked up, surprised. "Sarah, we don't need to, we can try to fix this. I know I made a terrible mistake, but our marriage is over," James, I interrupted him, feeling a strange calm envelop me. We both know that. What we had, it was special. But it's over. And now, we both need to move on. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. I packed my life into boxes, said goodbye to friends, closed chapters. James and I talked a few more times, always civilly, but with a distance that seemed insurmountable. He offered to move out, to leave me the apartment, but I refused. That place held too many memories, good and bad. I needed a fresh start. I arrived in Los Angeles on a sunny September morning. The city pulsed with a different energy than I was used to. Or maybe it was me who was different, seeing everything with new eyes. Olivia welcomed me with a tight hug and an encouraging smile. "You're going to crush it, Sarah," she said, leading me to the agency's office. "We're all excited to work with you." The first few months were intense. I threw myself headfirst into work, using it as an outlet for all the emotions that were still bubbling inside me. All-nighters at the office, endless brainstorming sessions, presentations to clients. I breathed advertising, lived for each new challenge. My team was talented and dedicated, and gradually we began to reap the fruits of our hard work. Successful campaigns, new clients, awards. The agency was on the rise, and I felt an integral part of this growth. It was during this frenzied period that I met Ethan. He was a freelance art director and was hired for a specific project. Tall, with piercing green eyes and an easy smile, Ethan brought new energy to the team. His talent was unquestionable, and soon we found ourselves working side by side on various campaigns. At first, I maintained a professional distance. The wound from James's betrayal was still fresh, and the idea of getting emotionally involved with someone scared me. But Ethan had a way of being that gradually broke down my barriers. He was attentive without being invasive, fun without being reckless. Our conversations flowed naturally, whether about work or personal matters. Gradually, I found myself anxiously waiting for our moments together, laughing at his silly jokes, admiring the passion with which he talked about art and creativity. One night, after a long work session, Ethan invited me to dinner. "Just as colleagues," he said, with a shy smile. "I think we deserve a break after all this stress." I hesitated for a moment, but something inside me, perhaps the part that still believed in the possibility of happiness, made me accept. We went to a small Italian restaurant, hidden on a quiet street. The food was delicious, the wine excellent, but what impressed me most was how relaxed and at ease I felt with Ethan. We talked about our lives, our aspirations, our fears. I told him about James, about the betrayal, about how I had come to Los Angeles to start over. Ethan listened attentively, his eyes full of understanding and empathy. "You're amazing, Sarah," he said, gently taking my hand across the table. "What you've been through, many would have given up. But look at you now. Strong, successful, inspiring. You deserve to be happy." I felt tears forming in my eyes, touched by his words and the affection in his voice. At that moment, something changed between us. It wasn't just physical attraction or professional compatibility. It was a deeper connection, based on mutual respect and admiration. The following months were like a dream. Ethan and I grew closer and closer, both at work and outside of it. Our projects together were brilliant, our ideas complementing each other perfectly. And in our free moments, we explored Los Angeles together, discovering new places, creating new memories. Ethan was patient and understanding. He understood my fears and insecurities, never pushing me for more than I was ready to give. Gradually, I felt the walls I had built around myself beginning to crumble. A year passed since my move to Los Angeles. The agency was thriving, and I felt more confident and fulfilled than ever. My relationship with Ethan had evolved naturally, and although we hadn't made anything official, we were practically a couple. It was during this time that I received an unexpected message from James. He wanted to talk, said he had some things to resolve and would like to see me in person. My first instinct was to refuse, but after talking with Ethan, who encouraged me to seek the closure I might need, I decided to accept. We agreed to meet at a neutral cafe, in a neighborhood that neither of us frequented regularly. When I arrived, James was already there, looking nervous and a little older than I remembered. "Hi, Sarah," he said, standing up to greet me. There was a moment of awkwardness. Would a hug be appropriate? A handshake? We ended up opting for an awkward wave. We sat down and placed our orders. For a few minutes, we talked about trivial things, the weather, traffic, how the city had changed. Finally, James took a deep breath and got to the subject that had brought him there. "Sarah, I wanted to apologize," he began, his voice trembling. "What I did to you, to our marriage, it was unforgivable. I was selfish, immature, and cowardly." I watched him in silence, feeling a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a strange sense of peace. "Emily and I," he continued, "we broke up a few months after you left. I realized that what I felt for her was more of an escape from reality than true love. But when I understood that, it was already too late." James told me how the months after my departure had been difficult. How he had sunk into regret and self-pity, until he finally sought therapy to deal with his problems. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "I know that's impossible. But I wanted you to know that I understand how much I hurt you, and that I'm sorry. Really sorry." I remained silent for a moment, absorbing his words. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw in his face all the pain I had felt. But another part, the part that had grown and strengthened over the last year, felt compassion. "Thank you for saying that, James," I finally replied. "I'm not going to lie and say it didn't hurt. It hurt a lot. But I'm happy now. Really happy. And, in a way, I owe that to you." James looked at me, confused. "If you hadn't done what you did, would never have had the courage to leave my comfort zone, to seek new challenges," I explained. "It was painful, but it made me grow. It made me stronger." We talked for a while longer, sharing what had happened in our lives over the past year. When we said goodbye, it was with a genuine hug and the feeling that a chapter had finally been closed. I left that cafe feeling light, as if a weight I didn't even know I was still carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. I called Ethan and told him everything that had happened. He listened attentively, offering words of support and understanding. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," he said. "You're amazing, you know that." That night, lying in Ethan's arms, I reflected on everything that had happened in the last few years. The pain of betrayal, the fear of starting over, the courage to open myself up to love again. I realized that each experience, good or bad, had shaped me, transformed me into the woman I was now. A few weeks later, I received another unexpected message. It was from Emily. She asked to meet me, saying she needed to talk to me in person. My first instinct was to refuse, but something told me this meeting could be important for my healing journey. I agreed to meet her at a park near my old apartment. When I arrived, Emily was already there, sitting on a bench, looking nervous and a bit worn down. "Hi, Sarah," she said, standing up when she saw me. "Thank you for coming." I sat down next to her, keeping a safe distance. For a few moments, we sat in silence, watching people pass by. I wanted to apologize," Emily finally said, her voice choked. "I know it probably doesn't mean anything to you now, but I'm sorry. Really sorry." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Emily told me how deeply she regretted getting involved with James, how guilt had consumed her in the months that followed. "There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about what I did, how much I hurt you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I understand if you hate me, Sarah. I just needed you to know how much I regret it." I remained silent for a moment, processing her words. Surprisingly, I didn't feel anger or resentment. Just a deep understanding that we all, at some point, make mistakes. "I don't hate you, Emily," I finally said. "I'm not going to lie and say it didn't hurt me, because it did. A lot. But I forgive you." Emily looked at me, shocked. "You forgive me? After everything I did?" I nodded. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or approving of what happened. It means freeing myself from the weight of resentment. And I choose to free myself. We talked for a while longer. Emily told me how the end of her relationship with James had made her rethink her life choices. She had moved, started therapy, and was trying to rebuild her life in a more honest and ethical way. When we said goodbye, it was with a hesitant but sincere hug. I felt as if the last knot that still tied me to the past had finally been untied. That night, I told Ethan about my meeting with Emily. He listened attentively, as he always did, offering his unconditional support. "You're amazing, you know that," he said, hugging me. "Your ability to forgive, to move forward, it's inspiring." I looked at Ethan, feeling my heart fill with love and gratitude. "I love you," I said, the words coming out naturally, without fear or hesitation. Ethan's smile lit up his entire face. "I love you too, Sarah. More than I can express." In the months that followed, Ethan and I became inseparable. Our relationship blossomed, based on trust, mutual respect, and a deep love that grew every day. At work, we continued to form an unbeatable team, our ideas complementing each other perfectly. It was on a Sunday afternoon, as we walked hand in hand through Griffith Park, that Ethan suddenly stopped, turning to me with a serious look. "Sarah," he began, taking my hands in his. "These last few months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought light, love, and inspiration to my days in a way I never imagined possible." My heart started to race, anticipating what was coming. "I know we've both been through a lot to get here," Ethan continued. "But that's exactly why I'm sure of what I feel, of what I want for our future." He got down on one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Sarah, would you do me the honor of marrying me?" Tears of happiness filled my eyes. "Yes," I exclaimed, pulling him into a passionate kiss. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The people around us applauded, some even whistled, but I barely noticed. At that moment, it was just Ethan and me, at the beginning of an exciting new chapter in our lives. In the months that followed, we immersed ourselves in wedding preparations. We decided on an intimate ceremony, just with close family and friends. We chose a small vineyard on the outskirts of Los Angeles as the venue, with a stunning view of the fields. The big day finally arrived. As I looked at myself in the mirror, dressed as a bride, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that brought me here. The pain of betrayal, the fear of starting over, the courage to open myself up to love again. Each experience had shaped me, made me the woman I was now. As I walked down the aisle towards Ethan, I saw in his eyes all the love and admiration I had always dreamed of finding. We exchanged our vows, promising love, respect, and partnership for life. The party was joyful and relaxed, exactly as we had planned. We danced, laughed, and celebrated with the people we loved most. In a quiet moment, Ethan pulled me to a corner. "Hey, Mrs. Creative Director," he joked, using the nickname he had given me at work. "How about we make that change we discussed?" I smiled, immediately understanding what he was referring to. Weeks before, we had talked about the possibility of buying a house together, a place we could truly call our own. "I think it's time," I replied, kissing him softly. A new beginning, in every sense. In the weeks following the wedding, between honeymoon and returning to work, Ethan and I started looking for our dream home. We wanted a spacious place, with a large backyard where we could entertain friends and, who knows, raise a family in the future. After much searching, we found the perfect place. A charming house on the outskirts of the city, with a beautiful garden and an incredible view of the sunset. The moment we stepped into it, we knew it was the right place. The moving process was chaotic, as it always is, but also incredibly exciting. Each box unpacked, each piece of furniture positioned, was one more step in building our new life together. One night, after a long day of unpacking and organizing, Ethan and I sat on the porch of our new home, sharing a bottle of wine. Looking at the starry sky, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. If someone had told me a few years ago that I would be here now, living this life, I would never have believed it, I commented, resting my head on Ethan's shoulder. He hugged me, kissing the top of my head. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Sarah. And I promise to do my best to make you happy every day." At that moment, reflecting on everything I had been through, I realized that every challenge, every pain, every moment of doubt had led me exactly where I was supposed to be. James's betrayal, which I once thought had destroyed my life, had actually opened the doors to a new path, a path that led me to a deeper and truer love than I ever imagined possible. I looked at Ethan, my husband, my partner, my best friend, and smiled. "I love you," I said simply. "I love you more," he replied, his eyes shining with love and promises of a bright future. There, in the arms of the man I loved, in our new home, I felt complete. My journey had been long and, at times, painful, but every step brought me here. And here, at this moment, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The future stretched out before us, full of possibilities. New challenges at work, the possibility of starting a family, trips we planned to take. Each new day was an adventure that we could hardly wait to live together. That night, I fell asleep in Ethan's arms, grateful for every experience that brought me here, eager for the future we would build together, and deeply happy in the present we were living. My story of betrayal and new beginnings had come to an end, but a new story, our story, was just beginning. And I could hardly wait to see what the next chapter had in store for us.